Story 1. When I booked the Airbnb, I thought I'd found a gem. It was mid-January and I'd been desperate to get away from my cramped apartment in the city. The listing was titled, Cozy Modern Cabin Nature Retreat, and the pictures showed a small, clean place with a big window overlooking the woods. The reviews were glowing. Peaceful, beautiful spot to recharge, and love the quiet, will definitely book again. The host, Marcy, replied quickly to my messages. She seemed warm, almost overly friendly, asking about my drive, my favorite snacks, even what time I usually woke up. I chalked it up to good hospitality. It was about a 4-hour drive from the city, through winding rural roads that narrowed as I got closer. By the time I reached the turnoff, I hadn't seen another car for at least 20 minutes. Snow covered the ground in thick, unbroken layers, the sky a pale, washed-out gray. The driveway was long and lined with skeletal trees. The cabin itself sat back from the road, a one-story building with a steep roof and dark wood siding. A single light burned in the window, though Marcy had said she wouldn't be there to greet me. Inside, it smelled faintly of pine and something else, not unpleasant, but stale, like a room that hadn't been opened in a while. The decor matched the photos, clean, minimal, and modern. A little too clean, maybe. No personal touches, no books on the shelves, no family photos. Just blank, staged perfection. I settled in, unpacked, and made tea. The silence outside was complete, almost oppressive. I'd grown up in the suburbs, so I was used to some background, hum cars, neighbors, distant sirens. Out here, there was nothing but the occasional groan of the wind through the trees. Around 11 p.m., I crawled into bed with my laptop, planning to watch a movie. About 20 minutes in, I heard something outside, a crunch, then another. Slow, deliberate steps in the snow. I froze, muted the movie. The steps stopped. After a long moment, I heard them again, moving toward the side of the cabin, then silence. I told myself it was an animal, a deer maybe, and forced myself to go to sleep. The next morning, I stepped outside to take in the view. That's when I saw the footprints. They started at the tree line and came straight to the cabin. Human footprints, deep impressions from boots. They circled the cabin once, and then went back into the woods. I went back inside, locked the door, and messaged Marcy. Hey, just wondering if you or anyone else came by last night. I saw some footprints. She replied quickly. Oh, probably just one of the neighbors. Totally safe area, nothing to worry about. Something about the smiley face unsettled me. I spent most of the day reading, trying not to think about the footprints. By nightfall, a storm had rolled in, snowflakes whirling in the beam of the porch light. Around midnight, the steps came again. This time they were slower. I could hear them clearly over the wind crunch. 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 Circling the cabin again. I stayed in bed, heart pounding, straining to hear through the silence that followed. Then came a tap, tap, tap at the big window in the living room. Just 3 taps. Then nothing. I didn't move until the gray light of morning filtered through the curtains. On the 3rd day, I decided to check the listing again. Something had been nagging at me. So, I noticed for the first time that some of the earlier reviews were short, almost cryptic. Strange nights here, but beautiful place. One simply said, didn't sleep well. Scrolling through the photos, I saw something I hadn't noticed before. In the corner of the living room, partially hidden behind a plant, was a small black dot. I went to check. It was there. A tiny lens, a camera. I sent Marcy another message. Hey, I found a camera in the living room. Was this mentioned in the listing? She replied, oh, it's just for security when the place is empty. Totally inactive while guests are there. Nothing to worry about. Again with the smiley face. I covered the camera with a dish towel. That night, the steps didn't just circle the cabin. They came right up to the bedroom window. I could hear breathing. Slow. Steady. I stayed completely still, every muscle tense. The breathing stopped. Then faintly, I heard my own name. Not shouted, just said, low, like a conversation. My my name, twice. I didn't sleep after that. The next morning, I packed my bags. I told myself I was being paranoid, but my gut screamed at me to leave. Before I left, I walked to the edge of the woods where the footprints always began. The snow there was disturbed, like someone had been standing for a long time, looking toward the cabin. And there were other prints too, smaller, lighter, leading deeper into the trees. I didn't follow them. When I messaged Marcy to say I was leaving early, she replied, "That's fine. Hope you enjoyed your stay." A week later, I went back to check the listing. It was gone. Marcy's profile too. I don't know who or what was out there those nights, but every time I hear snow crunching underfoot now, I feel that same cold dread in my stomach, like I'm back in that cabin. And sometimes when I'm falling asleep, I swear I hear my name whispered from just outside the window. Story 2. It started as a mistake. I was browsing Airbnb late one night in early July looking for a quick solo getaway. My criteria were simple. Somewhere quiet, near water, with decent Wi-Fi so I could do a little remote work. The place that caught my eye was titled Charming Lakeside Cottage Perfect Summer Retreat. The pictures were almost too perfect, soft golden light over a blue painted house, Adirondack chairs facing a still glassy lake, a dock jutting out into the water. The host's name was Evelyn. Her profile had only one picture, a blurred shot of a woman standing by the dock at sunset, and 2 reviews, both vague. Loved my stay, would come back. Peaceful and beautiful. The listing was a good deal cheaper than others in the area. I assumed it was because it was a little further from town. I booked it for 5 nights without overthinking. The directions Evelyn sent were detailed, almost overly so. Turn left at the mile marker with the bent sign. Follow the gravel road until the asphalt ends. If you reach the general store, you've gone too far. The cottage was even more isolated than I'd imagined. The gravel road wound through thick green forest for almost a mile before opening onto a wide, shimmering lake. The blue house sat right at the edge, paint faded but still cheerful in the sun. The key was in a lockbox, no sign of Evelyn. Inside, the place was small but cozy, mismatched furniture, lace curtains, a faint smell of lavender, and something older. The air felt still, like no one had been inside for a while. The lake view was breathtaking. From the living room window, you could see the water stretching out, flat and perfect, with tree-covered hills on the far side. No other houses in sight. That night, I sat on the dock with a beer, listening to the water lap softly against the wood. As the sun sank, the forest sounds grew louder. Crickets, frogs, the occasional splash of a fish. I was about to head inside when I noticed something strange. Out on the far side of the lake, where the hills met the water, there was a single light, small, faint, and swaying slightly like a lantern. I hadn't seen any houses over there earlier. I watched it for maybe a minute before it winked out. I told myself it was a boat. I woke up early and decided to explore. There was a narrow path that led from the back of the house along the shoreline, weaving in and out of the trees. About 100 yards down, I found something odd. A wooden chair, old and weathered, facing the lake. Sitting in it was a mason jar filled with water. Inside the jar was a single dead moth, wings splayed. It felt deliberate, arranged. I didn't touch it. Later, while making coffee, I noticed something even stranger. Across the lake, where I'd seen the light the night before, there was a small clearing in the trees. I couldn't see much detail, but I thought I spotted movement. Just for a second, the light came again. This time it was brighter, closer. I watched from inside the house, peeking through the lace curtain. The swaying was hypnotic, back and forth, back and forth. Then it stopped. The light held still for a long time before going out. The air in the cottage felt heavier somehow, like the humidity had thickened. I locked all the doors before bed. Around noon, I decided to go for a swim. The water was cool, but refreshing. Floating on my back, I glanced toward the far side again. The clearing was empty, but when I ducked under the water, I thought I heard something faint. muffled like a voice calling from far away. I came up gasping, scanning the shore, but saw nothing. Back at the cottage, I noticed the mason jar with the dead moth was gone. In its place, on the chair, was a small pile of lake stones stacked in a neat tower. I woke at 2:14 a.m. to the sound of water splashing. Not the gentle lap I'd grown used to. Heavy, deliberate splashes, like someone wading through the shallows. I lay frozen, listening. The sound moved slowly along the shoreline toward the dock. Then I heard the creak of the dock's boards underweight. I couldn't bring myself to look out the window. The splashing stopped. Then came a faint knocking sound, not at the door, but from underneath the house. I was starting to feel watched. While making breakfast, I saw ripples in the middle of the lake, wide, slow circles, as if something large had just slipped beneath the surface. I went into town for groceries, partly to clear my head. At the general store, I mentioned the lake to the cashier, an older woman with sharp eyes. "You're staying at Evelyn's place?" she asked. I nodded. She frowned. "You just be careful at night. Don't go near the water after dark." When I asked why, she just shook her head. "Some things like the dark." That night was different. No light across the lake, no splashing. Instead, I woke to the sound of the back door handle turning. Slowly, gently, testing it. The cottage was silent otherwise. I lay there for what felt like an hour before I heard footsteps retreat across the porch and down toward the dock. The next morning, the mason jar was back on the chair. This time it was empty, but the inside was wet. I planned to leave a day early. While packing, I caught movement outside. On the far shore in the clearing stood a figure. Too far to make out details, but tall. Still. It stayed there for nearly 20 minutes, watching. Then it turned and walked into the trees. I should have left then, I know that. Instead, I thought one last night wouldn't hurt. At 3:07 a.m., I woke to the sound of my name. Not shouted, whispered, from just outside the bedroom window. I stayed in bed, heart pounding so hard I thought it might be audible. The whisper came again, followed by a slow, dragging sound along the wall. Then silence. I didn't sleep. At first light, I threw my things in the car and didn't even lock the door behind me. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. On the dock, facing the water, was the figure. Still, watching. And in its hand was a small, swaying light. Story 3. I booked the cabin because I wanted to disappear for a while. Not permanently, just for a week or two. Work had been boiling my brain, my phone never stopped buzzing, and the endless click and scroll of my life in the city was making me feel like a ghost even before I left. The Airbnb listing made it seem perfect. Private mountain retreat, rustic but cozy, ideal for nature lovers. Sleeps too. The photos showed a small, weathered wooden cabin with a wraparound porch, deep in a patch of bright yellow autumn trees. One picture, taken from the back deck, showed nothing but rolling forest dropping into a valley. The host name was Harlan. No profile picture, no reviews newer than last year. But I didn't think much of it. The price was right, and the solitude appealed to me. The GPS lost signal halfway up the mountain road. After that, I had to rely on the printed directions Harlan had emailed me. They were strangely specific. Pass 3 mailboxes on the left, take the unmarked gravel turn, follow it for 0.6 miles. Look for the old red gate that doesn't close. When I finally saw the cabin, it felt like I'd crossed into another time. The paint was peeling, the porch sagged slightly, and the trees pressed in close on all sides. But the air was clean and sharp, the kind that makes you feel like your lungs are brand new. The key was in a lockbox by the door. Inside it was warm. A small wood stove was already burning, crackling softly. I figured Harlan had lit it before I arrived, though I hadn't seen another vehicle. The cabin had 2 rooms, a main space with a small kitchen and a couch, and a bedroom with a single large window facing the woods. The floors were uneven. The air smelled faintly of cedar and something else, a little sweet, a little stale. I unloaded my bags and took a short walk around the property before dark. The trees were so dense that even 50 feet from the cabin, it felt like the forest swallowed me. No neighbors, no road noise, just the constant hush of leaves shifting overhead. It was the kind of dark you don't get in the city. No street lamps, no distant glow. When I turned off the lights, the cabin disappeared into pitch blackness. I lay in bed listening to the stove popping and hissing. Then, sometime after midnight, I heard it, a faint scratching. Not outside, inside. It came from the far corner of the bedroom, where the floor met the wall. Soft, deliberate. I told myself it was a mouse and tried to ignore it. But just as I started drifting off, I heard something else, a whisper of movement, almost like fabric sliding against wood, coming from inside the wall itself. I made coffee and sat on the porch. In the daylight, the cabin seemed harmless again. The scratching from the night before felt easy to dismiss, maybe a squirrel in the crawl space. I decided to hike down toward the valley. The air was crisp, and the path wound past clusters of trees with leaves the color of fire. I didn't see a single soul. When I returned in the afternoon, I noticed something odd. A small pile of leaves directly in front of the porch steps. They were perfectly arranged, almost like a nest. I brushed them aside without thinking much of it. Inside, the wood stove was lit again. I hadn't left it burning when I left. The scratching came earlier. This time it was closer to the head of my bed, as if whatever was inside the wall had moved. The sound was rhythmic, scratch, pause, then a slow dragging, like fingernails tracing along the inside of the wood. I pressed my ear to the wall, but the sound stopped immediately, leaving only the faint ticking of the stove cooling in the other room. I left the lamp on the rest of the night. I emailed Harlan about the noises. He replied within minutes, "It's nothing to worry about. The cabin settles at night. Just enjoy your stay." That answer didn't sit right. I'd lived in old buildings before. I knew the difference between settling wood and something alive. When I stepped outside that afternoon, there was another pile of leaves at the bottom of the steps. This time, mixed in with them were small twigs, each one snapped clean in half. The scratching woke me around 1 a.m., but now it was accompanied by a faint tapping like someone knocking from inside the wall. Tap, tap, pause, tap, tap, tap. I sat up, hard hammering. The tapping shifted to the far side of the room, then the ceiling. My eyes followed the sound, but the wood looked undisturbed. Then, very softly, I heard my name. I didn't sleep again that night. I searched the cabin for signs of animals' droppings, chewed wood, holes, but found nothing. The walls were solid, too solid. Even in the crawl space beneath, there was no sign of an opening big enough for anything larger than a mouse. I was starting to feel watched. While making lunch, I glanced at the window above the sink and saw movement, just the barest flicker of shadow between the trees. When I went to the porch to look, there was no one there. But there was another pile of leaves, larger this time, with small stones arranged in a tight circle on top. The sounds began as soon as the sun went down. Scratching, tapping, dragging, sometimes faint, sometimes so loud it seemed like the wood would splinter. I sat in the living room staring at the walls, trying to pinpoint the source. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw the stove door shift just a tiny movement, as if it had been nudged from inside. The fire flared for a moment, casting strange shadows across the floorboards. One shadow didn't move with the others. I was done. I packed my things, planning to leave before nightfall. But when I went to start the car, the battery was dead. The road down the mountain was too long to walk before dark. My phone still had no signal. Inside the cabin, the air felt heavier, warmer. The sweet, stale smell was stronger now, almost cloying. Another pile of leaves waited by the steps, this one arranged in a perfect spiral. The sounds were constant now, moving through the walls, the ceiling, the floor. Sometimes they stopped directly behind me, as if listening. At one point, the stove door creaked open on its own. Inside, the fire was gone, replaced by a darkness deeper than the unlit room around me. I swear I saw movement in that dark, the suggestion of something pulling itself closer. Around 3 a.m., I felt a weight on the bed. Not a full person's weight, but enough to dip the mattress slightly. I didn't move. A voice, low, soft, almost inside my head said, "Stay." At first light, I left everything behind and started walking down the road. After about 2 miles, my phone picked up a weak signal. I called a tow service and waited by the road until they arrived. When we got back to the cabin, the driver refused to come inside. He said the place felt wrong. As we drove away, I glanced back. On the porch, just in front of the door, was a fresh pile of leaves. In the center was my missing room key.